Welcome to Lip Service for Contractors. Here you'll learn what moves the needle in your business. With your hosts, Brigham, the deep thinker, Josh, the $100 million contractor, Zach, the confused millennial, Laura, the foreigner. Lip service. It's not about dictatorship. It's about leadership. It's not about duplication. It's about innovation. It's not about stuff. It's about your people. Strap in and get ready for some lip service.
And we're back with another episode of Lip Service for Contractors. You guys, we've got a phenomenal show for you today. It is all about immersion, all right? The ultimate secret to learning and growing fast is about immersion, all right? Focus, concentration on that thing that is most important. So all of that and much, much more in 60 seconds.
Chances are you love what you're hearing on Lip Service for Contractors. And if you want to go deeper, have an actionable playbook, or just want to learn from some of the most successful and profitable contractors in the industry, check out Clover Marketing from Josh and Laura. They give away free, amazing information, tools, SOPs, scripts, and processes that help their family business grow to over 140 million. And those same tools have helped other contractors in the industry blow up their business and grow an average of 20% every single year. Check out growwithclover.com/free gifts. They update the free gift section all the time, so make sure you keep coming back.
Power Selling Pros is the customer service coaching company for contractors. Their one-on-one coaching for CSRs helps contractors book at least 85% of their calls and wow more customers. And their group training for technicians helps you create a better buying experience in the home and close more sales. Visit powersellingpros.com to learn more about how you can make more money with their coaching programs.
All right, Lip Service for Contractors. So guys, let me just set the stage here. About 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to speak to 20 technicians, and I was very excited, also very new. But I wanted to make an impact. I wanted to make an impression on them. And they're all kind of trickling in at different times from their trucks and from what they were doing, right? And so I had about 30 to 60 seconds with each one of them as they came in one by one. And what I did is I drew a picture of the way the chairs were set up in the room. And as each one of them came in, I would write their name plus something that I would remember to help me remember the name, right? For example, let's say it was their shirt, or it was their trousers, or their shoes, or their facial expression when they first came in, or their facial hair, what have you, their hats. I used something to remember the name by. And so then I went to the front before we began. I said, look, I just want to make sure that I've got everybody's name straight. And I named every one of them. All 20 technicians. They were so impressed. It set the tone for the entire presentation. It's phenomenal. It was awesome. It's a great experience. But it is incredible what you can do with a little immersion, concentration, focus in specific situations that can make all the difference in your business. And of course, we're going to be talking about those. But before we get into any of that, let's have everybody else chime in on this concept of immersion.
Yeah, and that's a great story, and it's very effective too. Like, I'm not always proud to say I've not known all of my own technicians to walk into another room and know all of their technicians. It's impressive, but really, I think the moral to that story is most people think that meeting starts when 9 o'clock hits or 8 o'clock hits, and they're going, you started before that and decide you were just going to be all in from the beginning, right? And you set yourself up for success. I think immersion, I think a lot of people understand that immersion is the greatest way to learn, but this really is going to be about how do we apply this to our lives, to our business. But yeah, I'm excited about this topic.
So I have a question about this topic.
Yeah.
It's really, really nice in theory to me, but where on earth do you get in everyday stuff? Where do you get the time to immerse yourself and really memorize names, master something? Because we're all extremely busy. Most of the people listening to this are business owners, contracting business owners at that, are extremely busy. So it sounds like one of those things you read in a book and be like, wow, wouldn't that be nice? So what is the practical advice for how the everyman can do this?
All right, so this is a really great question, and the answer is comes best from Dan DePani. And now, if you're not familiar with Dan DePani, he's a monk, right? He went to Hawaii and became a monk. And not everybody just decides they want to become a monk. And one of the things he learned as a monk is to learn how to focus and to intently concentrate on things. And what's interesting about what he said is you become good at what you practice on a regular basis. And what do we practice more? Do we practice distraction or do we practice concentration? Well, the obvious answer to that is that we practice distraction a whole lot more than we practice concentration. Why is that?
I think part of this too, like Zach, like I'm going to address it like really specific, exactly what you said, right? Like, how do you make the time? And it becomes like, how can you not make the time?
Mm-hmm.
It's a choice ultimately, right? And it's real easy for me to say, hey, you need to make the time. But the truth is you do. Like, it's not an option. If you want to be successful, you have to make the time. So many people tend to dabble, right? Like, I got this big problem. A perfect example of immersion, a perfect example of is you have this problem. Let's say it's recruiting, or you have this sales issue, whatever. A lot of people say, okay, let's talk about it. Spend 15, 20 minutes of an hour meeting talking about it. And, maybe we have an idea or two, maybe we don't, but then we just kind of walk away and nothing gets done. Immersion would be, hey, I'm getting everybody that's involved in this decision-making process. I'm ordering lunch in and I'm locking the office until we come up with a plan. That's immersion, right? We do not talk about something else. We do not change the subject. We do not gab. We don't talk about the weather for as long as it takes. We lock ourselves in the room and solve the problem. How many more times, how much more effective would that be than our current problem solving issue, right? The truth is it's way more effective. And we all know that would be more effective. But how you use it, like that problem, how many hours does it take you every single week to solve? Which one's actually less time?
Right? And what ends up costing you more money is not immersing yourself. I don't know how many stories I've heard from contractors before they started working with us where their price book was just in a bad way, and literally Josh forced them to lock themselves in a room together, and we had to force them, and eventually they sat in the room together, and it literally, they went from a business that was struggling to a business that was growing by just pure immersion.
So this is a true story, and I'll tell you the story. So
you think I don't tell true stories?
No. I'm going to give a specific example, but it's an extreme example. So I do personal one-on-one consulting, and I help some people with like media buying and going through that process, and I help them grow, rapidly and incredibly fast, right? And a lot of times when I get called in, it's generally not because they're doing amazingly well. It's because they're struggling, right? And sometimes it's because they're not growing fast enough. Sometimes it's profitability. Sometimes their business is just a drain of their energy and their fun and their time, right? And I have one client, we're not going to name names, but their pricing was off, terribly off, and they didn't have any margin. And when you don't have any margin, that makes your business awfully stressful and not fun. So I talked to him. I was like, well, you need to update your price book. You're clearly undercharging. This is your biggest problem. If we solve this, you instantaneously make more money. The easiest way to make more money is to raise your prices. By far, no question. It's easy. It's simple. It's great to do, right? And I talked to him for months over the phone. We'd have a conversation once a week. I'm like, where are we at in the price book? Where are we at in the price book? Where are we at in the price book? It came down to the point, I'll go out for 2 to 3 day consultation visits where I'm going to sit with them, and I'm going to do some work with them. I'm going to help finalize stuff. I'm going to do a deep dive on stuff they don't even know they have issues with. And I end up taking one of the 3 days I was with this business, and I said, you're getting this price book done. I'm like, yeah, we'll get it done. I'm like, no, you're getting it done right now. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I'm here. You're paying me to be here, but I'm not going to spend the day with you. I'm not going to spend a single minute with you. In fact, I'm going to lock both of you in your office. I'm taking away your cell phones. I'm turning off your landline, and you're doing your price book for the next 8 hours. You could come out when the price book is done. And so like they're paying me to be there. And I'm like sitting in the other, I'm working with CSRs, or I'm doing ride-alongs, right? And I'm calling them every half hour. I'm like, you're not in that room, I'm going to be pissed. Like, I'm going to just leave if I find you outside the room. They're like, I remember calling like, hey, we're going to grab something. I'm like, nope, I'm going to have it delivered to the office. You do not leave today until the price book is done. Right.
Ooh,
And all of a
yeah.
sudden, this 3-month process, which should have taken a day or two, took them like 5 or 6 hours because they were just entirely immersed, going to solve that problem instantaneously. You know, their profit margin, their EBITDA flew up, and all of a sudden they were making more money. Who freaking knew, right? Common sense. But immersion. And that was a rough one because they weren't very happy with me, but long term they were super happy because it was the biggest issue they were having.
Love it. I love it. So if we were to, as Dead Depani says, work on our focus and our concentration and practice it on a regular basis, very similar to what to the story Josh just described, as opposed to continuing to practice our distraction, right? If you were to consider that there's 24 hours a day, we're supposed to sleep 8 hours, that leaves us another 16. And if we are practicing for 16 hours, this distraction with our phones, with email, with everything, there's not a lot that we're really, the meaningful things, there's not a lot that we're going to get done. Let me give you actually, I'm going to ask Josh a question. Josh, how long did it take you to become a black belt in jiu-jitsu?
9
How many?
years? 9 years?
So 9 years. And with jiu-jitsu, you guys, you don't buy belts. You got to earn them.
It may have been 8 years.
Yeah.
I don't even know how long it's been. That's how long I've trained jiu-jitsu. That's kind of sad.
How
But
many?
I think 9 years, 8 or 9 years.
How many hours a week when you're really hitting it
I
hard?
did. So I would do 2 hours a day, 4 days a week for years and years and years. Now I train like 3 times a week for about 2 hours each.
So we're looking at what, 8-10 hours a week for 8 years from a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, which is actually really fast. Most people it takes 10 to 12 years to become a black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, and part of it is skill and depending on how quickly you pick it up, but there's specific things you have to do to go from belt to belt, right?
It's really skill based. Like jiu-jitsu is not like karate where like if I know how to do this kick that works, it's you have to be able to execute it and actually choke, good people. So it's a lot like boxing. Like you move up in the ranks when you beat people and when you're better. Your knowledge base certainly is a big piece of that. It's one of the largest pieces of it, but you have to be able to actually perform it too, and not against like a punching bag, against a real person that's trying to fight you back.
The becoming good at anything, there's a psychologist called Eric Erickson, and he said to become good at anything, to become great, to master something, it takes 10,000 hours. And there's a flaw to that concept. Yes, 10,000 hours tends to correlate with people doing stuff super well. And obviously 10,000 hours is due to immersion. However, it doesn't have to take that long, or even if you put in 10,000 hours and you don't apply what's called deliberate practice, it essentially, you can either cut back that 10,000 hours, or you could have invested 10,000 hours and you could still suck because you haven't been deliberate. So whatever you choose to work on and immerse yourself within, you have to apply what is called deliberate practice. And what deliberate practice is essentially you have to continually adjust course. Like try this, if it doesn't work, you try something else. It's like any golfer, they swing their club, and I don't know anything about golf, and they have to make these consistent tweaks in order to improve. And
Yeah,
it's those tweaks.
Golf is improved at the driving range and not in the course, right? Because of consistency.
Right. And that's
So-
exactly what deliberate practice is.
I get to drop a book, and Laura didn't even drop the name. Amazing book about this, and it's actually kind of disproves the whole theory that people are naturally gifted at things, which I also don't believe, especially after reading this book. A book called The Talent Code breaks down perfect practice or deliberate practice in detail, and actually talks about the physical aspects that happen to the brain when you practice properly. It's pretty amazing. A good example, I think the best example of this is musicians. There is a different quality in musicians entirely based on the way you practice. Nobody's naturally good as a musician. That's not true. They've proven it over and over again. It's that you were decent and you got excited about it, and then you spent a lot of time on it, and you had deliberate practice. So the difference between how most people practice and deliberate practice for music is really simple. A person that's practicing, and let's just call it piano, because it's simple, right? You play the piano and you have this Beethoven song, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You play the song. The normal person practices, they screw up and they continue the song and they try to play the song 10 times, whatever. They try to get as close to perfect as we can. Someone who does deliberate practice plays that song, has a screw up, stops, restarts the song over, and completes it one time perfectly every day. That's deliberate practice. So you could see how really immersing yourself and saying, I'm going to figure this out perfectly, right? I'm going to do it perfect, as opposed to dabbling in it, right? Like, that's okay. I did pretty good. I got 90% there. Someone who's actually a good musician does not ever stop at 90%. It's 100% every single time. And I think music is a great example because if you hit that note off, like, or if your timing was off, it's not debatable. It's fact. You've done it, right? It's over with. So I think it's a great book, by the way. Talent Code. It's amazing. Goes into some really interesting stuff. Talks about jujitsu, soccer or football, musicians, all the most successful. What's it called when the kid is like really really good something and like a not natural but
sugar.
oh my goodness.
This is gonna annoy me so much.
Yep. Anyway, when the kid's really good something,
When we think
like
of it, we'll say it.
I think the term is
Savant. A savant.
Yeah, that's not the word I was thinking, but that'll work. So
Yeah,
like a savant,
yeah.
It like they don't really exist, and it proves like step by step who people who thought they were a savant. As a 10-year-old kid that could play the piano like better than an adult, and then you break down that they actually do deliberate practice, and they spend 10 hours a day doing it. So does that really make you savant? It doesn't, right? You just practiced more than everybody else.
So I got a question for you. Go ahead.
No, I have 4 questions. So if you have one, you go first.
Yeah, I've got one. So the question I have revolves around stamina. In other words, an ability to keep yourself completely engaged, completely immersed in that thing that is so incredibly important. And the thought that came to my mind was never quitting, never giving up. Now, look, I do this to my son Isaac all the time. He wrestles. He's very committed. In fact, he's believe it or not, he's in the Dells in Wisconsin right now as we speak, trying to make weight for a wrestling match. But I tell him all the time that I want him to have fun. I want him to do his best and never, ever quit. In fact, I say to him, our family saying is Dickinsons don't quit. I don't ever want to see you on the mat quitting. I don't care if you lose. And you shouldn't care if you lose. If you did your best, that's awesome. Okay. We'll learn from whatever from the loss and get better next time. But do not quit on the mat. Do not quit afterwards. You've got to really immerse yourself in what you're doing and choose now not to quit. So that was the thing that came to mind as I questioned, okay, how do you develop the stamina to stay immersed? Because it could be exhausted. What do you guys think?
So that's a question?
Yeah. How do you do it?
So what comes correlated with stamina is resilience. So stamina is built over time. Resilience is a decision. You can choose to be resilient. You can choose not to give up. And typically resilience is built through failure. If you can continually get up over and over and over, you develop the trait of being resilient. And if you can continually keep getting up, as a consequence, you build stamina. So one comes as a consequence of the other. So if you're going to immerse yourself, you cannot immerse yourself assuming you will absolutely succeed. You've got to prepare to potentially fail, and be able to get back up and be able to keep getting back up. And that still goes back to deliberate practice. So stamina can be built through resilience.
Yeah,
that's the answer to that question.
To relate it to business, right? It's not always, when we say immerse yourself, it's not that you always come up with the right answer, but you cannot leave that room until you come up with a potential right answer, right? And that's just a choice when it really comes down to it. You will not sit in a room and twiddle your thumbs and not make a decision or try something new. You just won't. It's just not human nature. Like, you want out of that room, and that's perfect. Or in Brigham's example, right? memorizing, really treating that meeting as an entire experience, right? And he immersed himself, and because of that, he tied himself in. And I'm willing to bet he stayed after, and he all treated that whole thing as an experience. It was an immersion experience, not just for him, but for the technicians, right? Another example, we were talking a little bit before this, Brigham did his mission in Brazil, right? Didn't speak a word of Portuguese, right? Everybody knows this, but I want to point it out, right? If you want to learn another language, the best way to do it isn't through a book. It's not through Rosetta Stone. It works. But if you really want to learn a language, you move there. And why does that work? It's because you're surrounded by it and there's no escaping. You don't leave. If you can't speak the language, you can't speak to people. That's a big deal.
Yeah, there's more to that story than you know. There was a lot going on the first few months of my mission in Brazil. I'm an extrovert, believe it or not. I love people. I love interacting. I love communicating. And I was put at the age of 19 in a world of my own. Why? Because I couldn't interact with anybody else. On top of that, I had zero self-confidence because I barely graduated from high school. I'm sure there isn't one contractor listening to this podcast that can relate to that, right? I barely graduated. I mean, literally with, D's, I graduated, right? So zero self-confidence. Had to have a tutor one-on-one work with me in the missionary training center to keep me up to speed. So when I got out there was a challenge that was given to all the missionaries, and thank goodness, because I was not doing well. I wasn't happy. I was dealing with depression, anxiety, because I was in my own world where I couldn't interact and communicate with other people. Luckily, the challenge is that if you were to memorize 6 lessons, right? There's 6 lessons that we teach, and the challenge was to do it in 40 days. That it'll help you learn the language and that sort of thing. And so I grabbed a little notepad that I could fit in my pocket, and I'd write the first letter of each word. And we would walk 5 to 10 miles a day in 100 degree weather and 100% humidity. And I would take my mind off of everything. The fact that I was in a third world country, the fact that I couldn't understand what anyone was saying, the fact that I was constantly hungry. Not that I never ate. With all the walking that we did, you burn a lot of calories, and it was just brutal, right? In the beginning, and the memorization got my mind off of, the self-talk and into the language itself. And there's 10 guys that went on this mission of mine to Brazil at the same time. And there were 3 that were able to memorize these lessons in 40 days. And it's about 15,000 words when all was said and done. And it was Elder Olson, who is now a dean of a college. It was Elder McKinley, who is now running a oil company in Texas, and me, the guy that barely graduated from high school. And the way that I did it wasn't because I was talented at memorizing. I did it because I developed the skill of it by intense immersion, intense focus. And I find that as I look back on the different successes I've had in my life, it's because I learned to intensely focus. Pretty amazing for a kid that was hyperactive.
Immersion, Brigham, clearly it allowed you solve quite a problem. You were lonely, you were experiencing depression, you were anxious. What has been found both in business and through research is immersion can solve almost all big problems. There's this billionaire CEO, his name is Keith Cunningham, and he wrote a book called The Road Less Stupid. And he, every single morning without fail, sits down with his biggest problem. And he's like, what is this? He says, what is the biggest? He basically states the problem, and then he forces himself to come up with solutions. And no solution is stupid, because if you go into like this self-judgment phase or process, you're eliminating your creation, your imagination. So an idea for our listeners here is any big problem that you have, you don't have to do it every day. Obviously that's awesome. But I think when you're developing a habit at first, every day is almost unrealistic. but sit down with your biggest problem and immerse yourself within that problem by simply closing your eyes, setting your timer for 10 or 20 minutes, and writing down every single idea that comes to mind on potentially on how you could overcome that problem or that challenge, or not having enough money or not meeting your revenue goal this year. And you will almost always come up with solutions that are worth testing. And again, that goes back to immersion. So thank you for sharing that story, Brigham. It triggered that thought. And this guy contributes that idea, that practice, to being a $1 billion business owner today.
Yeah, that's one of my claim to fames. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but Laura certainly knows this. I tell people, and it's without fail, that, hey, I'll do a 30-minute call with you. And if you want to do that 30-minute call, you come with one problem. And I could promise you that I will solve that problem within 30 minutes. I'll like give an actual action plan step by step. And I've been promising that for like years. And never once have I not come up with a solution, right? And really all I'm doing is the moment they have a problem, I start asking questions. And most of the time it reveals itself. And that's kind of my skill set too, is just to come up with things on the fly. But sometimes it's like the most out of the box. Sometimes it's like I know because I've done it. Sometimes it's like if just intensely focusing and asking questions and digging deeper and focusing on this and why this and why is this and why is this an after effect of this, and just like deep diving into this one problem, you'd be amazed how effective you are at critical thinking and solving that.
Brigham, you've brought up something that I think is actually super important too. Clearly, business owners, it's a stressful thing that we do, that we've chosen to do. Anxiousness and depression can arise and does arise. And I've heard and spoke with contractors and helped them through it. You've potentially revealed a solution, focusing on something else. So potentially, and I don't know, I'm asking you this question, would you encourage contractors to pick up something else that requires deep focus, that distracts them from their anxiousness?
So I would, because what was interesting about memorizing those discussions or those lessons in 40 days is that I focused. It's like paying the price, right? To get yourself out of it. But as soon as I did that, I started speaking the language better, and my comprehension of the language was better. In fact, it got to the point where I could start joking around in the language, which is, you guys, I have to be able to do that. I have to be able to interact and socialize with other people and actually feel like I'm making a difference. See, that was the thing, as I felt passionate about what I was doing, I just couldn't do it. Why? Because I couldn't speak the language. And so I needed, out of necessity for my own happiness, my own contentment, needed to resolve the thing that was keeping me from the thing that I wanted to do. So yeah, I would say that, at least in my particular situation, anytime I've ever felt anxiety or depression, it was intense focus that got me out of it. And I could share other business examples as well. Maybe we will later on the podcast, but yeah. The short answer to your question is just absolutely yes.
My only caveat to that is yes, but what Brigham did and what I would recommend do is not something, intensely focused on something that doesn't move towards the problem. It doesn't have to be 100%, but what's causing you anxiety for Brigham is not speaking the language. He focused on something that helps solve that problem. Right? So don't ignore the problem and focus on something else because it stresses you out. Totally. Like then you'll never tackle it. That's a terrible way to live your life, much less run your business, right?
That's also when you're identifying what the problem is, to Josh's point there, you have to make sure that you're identifying the cause, not the symptom.
Correct.
Right. I'm going to go focus on Netflix for a little bit because I got some things I'm really stressed about right now.
That's beautiful. That's exactly what Dan DePani says, is that when we instead of focusing on the situation, right, the problem at hand, the thing that's very, very important, instead we retreat to a distraction, the thing that we practice most likely 16 hours a day.
Totally.
But let me give you a specific business example. Back in 2008, and you hear 2008, right? Before COVID, 2008 was that year that it sucked for everyone.
it sucked for me because I took my marketing company, a small marketing company, and merged it into a software company. I thought it was going to go gangbusters because this software could calculate a manual J automatically without having to, do much measurement like you usually do. And so I thought it was going to be amazing, right? And moved my family to Florida, and within 5 months, this company goes kaput. It's done. It's over. And I remember talking to my father-in-law over the phone, and he was offering me money. And I guess I was just too prideful to accept, right? To accept the money. And I can remember taking the phone after I graciously thanked him, thanks, but no thanks. And, one of the things that went through my mind was when asking his daughter's hand in marriage, he asked, okay, cool, how are you going to take care of her? And I promised him that I'd always be able to take care of her. And so when he offered me money in that moment, it was pretty painful. And so I remember throwing that phone down, and I couldn't stand for very long. In fact, I took a couple of stumble steps and dropped to my knees and cried like I've never cried before. But then after that, I began to focus in on what needed to be done. And because of that focus, and it took a lot of time, but I developed this crazy thing called the pattern for excellence. 8 principles with 1 outcome. The thing that we teach CSRs, technicians, and even business owners now. It's helped literally thousands of lives to perform at a high level, and it was born out of necessity, out of immersion, intense focus. In fact, during the same time, my youngest son, Hagen, was diagnosed with severe autism, nonverbal autism. And I went to a place called Autism Journeys, and they said, hey, you caught it early. He's 18 months old, and he can have a chance at a normal life. Can you imagine that? A chance at normal life, and all for the low price of $3,500 a month. Well, you guys, I was broke. How was I going to come up with $3,500 a month? I mean, should I go rob a bank? I mean, that was my initial thought. And I realized that there wasn't a job that could really pay me enough to provide for my family and pay for this therapy for him. And so I knew I had to start a business. I had to come up with something that people needed that I could provide. And so I started this coaching company, teaching the pattern for excellence, and the rest is history. But it was a result of intense focus, intense concentration that I learned back on my mission. I mean, I guess you could say that I was an overnight success over a 25-year period of time, which obviously doesn't make sense at all. But the point is I learned on my mission to focus intently, and that was the same thing that got me out of being bankrupt and providing for my son with autism, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And what we're talking about too is like these are extreme pain points, and they certainly are effective for extreme pain points, like something that's really serious, right? But by the way, this is effective for anything, right? Just how long you have to immerse yourself really can change, right? How easy a problem is this? How difficult a problem is it? And you have to do some calculation too, right? Like if you're trying to save $1,000 a year, maybe you don't need to lock yourself in the office for 24 hours. But if you're trying to increase your profit margin by 5%, and your net goes up 5%, right? And this is $1 million, it's worth locking yourself in the office for 24 hours. Right?
If you're struggling with focusing, highly encourage that concept that we spoke about, thinking time. But there's and there's an incredible book. I truly believe if you use that concept and you read a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, incredible book all about the power of deep focus and immersion. And there was one other one. Oh, and if you have if you feel like your memory sucks, and you have like memory, like you feel like you've memory issues, again, that's just a learned behavior. There's a book called Moonwalking with Einstein. So if either of those problems prevent you from immersing yourself because you cannot focus for long enough, deep work's your answer. If you feel like you're not creating enough ideas to solve the problem, to solve any problem, the thinking time solution. And if you feel like your memory sucks, moonwalking with Einstein.
Yep.
They will absolutely solve those issues. I promise.
The book The Lean Startup is a good way to figure out how to test things and change ideas too. And another thing we do, like you see these big headphones, these kind of ridiculous headphones, they're for podcasts, but they're for a lot of other things. If I'm in concentration mode, there's amazing, videos, but they're not really videos. It's just audio on YouTube for deep concentration. And it's like scientifically proven studies about, tones and music that lets you hyper focus. Sometimes when I put that in, like I literally like look up and it's been like 4 hours, like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Well, that's called flow. I'm not sure. Have you guys
Yeah.
heard of it? It's this guy called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, such a crazy name. But yeah, have you ever been in that place where literally hours passed and it didn't feel like hours? Time like slows down. It's actually a thing. It's called flow. And totally that music thing, oh my gosh, so powerful.
And
favorite-
no one can bug me, right? Because I can't hear him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if I'm calling him.
My favorite
Now
source
he has the perfect excuse to ignore me.
Yeah. My favorite source for the concentration music is brain.fm. It's a website.
Ah, oh, cool. I'm going to write.
It's actually a subscription site, but it's out of this world good. I'm obsessed with it. But I have 4 questions, 4 confusing millennial questions
Oh,
now.
yeah, you're very patient.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
The skeptic is about to enter the building. So question number 1, it sounds like there's 2 types of immersion we're talking about here. Correct me if I'm wrong. One is immersion in a subject like music or writing or fill in the blank here, where you immerse yourself and you become a master at something. The other is immersion in a problem, trying to increase your profit margin, trying to fix your marriage, trying to resolve a conflict within your company. Am I correct in making that connection? There are 2 different types really, or
No,
is it all the
there's
same?
there's only one type, right? So like if you're really, let's use music as an example, or we could use jujitsu or whatever, right? But music is more relatable to more people, right? So when you're immersing yourself in music, right? It's not that you're learning how to play music. I'm learning how to play a song over and over and over again. You don't play 30 songs in that immersion. You own one song. For jujitsu, like you don't learn 30 moves, right? Like when you first learn, you learn an armbar. And you learn that armbar until you can pull it off on people trying to stop you that actually know what they're doing. Until you do that, you don't move on from an armbar. Like it just is, right? So it seems like it's a broader topic, but it's just a bunch of small lessons within a broader topic. Does that make sense? Everybody on the same page?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the follow-up question is, when I worked, so I worked at this company in Austin, Texas, and we had this debate one day about focusing on one skill or one task versus developing a talent stack. So the example that was used was Donald Trump. Everyone's argument was Donald Trump is the master of the talent stack. He is very good at a lot of things, better than most people at several things, but there's not one thing you point to and say, Donald Trump is the master of fill in the blank. And that argument was used to say, you don't need to immerse yourself. You don't need to focus intensely on something if you are very good or at a lot of things, because it's good to be busy. It's good to have your focus in many different places. And there are business owners who are listening to this who are going to say, I've got lots to do. My manager wears many hats. I wear many hats. How could I possibly pick something?
You have to pick one. Like I would make the argument really clearly, like, and Donald Trump is kind of a controversial person. But like, we'll just say negotiating. Let's say he's amazing at negotiating, and let's just assume everybody's on the same page there. Do you think he was amazing at negotiating because he never focused on it and never concentrated on it and never made effort to get good at negotiating? Do you think it was a natural from birth? Like, I just know how to negotiate. No, he put together that talent stack by concentrating on individual tactics. That's how you do it. Like, there's just no other way to do it. You don't play soccer and say, like, I'm only going to dribble for 5 minutes. I'm going to take shots for 5 minutes. And then I'm going to do throw-ins for 5 minutes. And I do this my whole life. That's not how you get golf is a perfect example with Laura, right? Like if you go out and, you hit one ball with each club, are you ever going to get good at golf? No. You take one club out and you hit it until you get hit straight and far. And you just keep trying. And then once you get that down, you're comfortable that I can move on from that. Then you try a different club. And that's how every golfer does it. That's how Donald Trump did what he did. That's how everybody puts that skill stack together. I think it's you don't have to be the greatest in the world at something. You just have to be better than others. And that's a win. I don't know if that answers really, I guess, but
That does. That does for sure.
I think so, for sure. Yeah.
You had other two questions, didn't you, Zach? Or did they get answered in a roundabout way?
One of them was answered. And I think the other one was, this might be a whole nother podcast episode.
okay.
But when you lock you and your coworkers, your partner into a room to solve a problem, how do you make sure that you're actually working on the right problem?
It's back to making sure that you have identified it's again asking yourself that question, what is the one thing that is getting in the way of my growth right now? Those kind of questions. And that is I feel like I load books on you guys, but it's the concept called the one thing, and you don't even need to read the book necessarily. It's like, what is the one thing that if I did right now would have the biggest impact, or what is the one problem that's causing the most issues right now? When you make sure that is a cause and not a symptom, that's your problem, and that's what you focus on.
Yeah, and it's the answer to that is it's not easy. It's better to solve some problems, even if it's not the perfect problem. But you just have to put thought into what really is causing issue in your business. In general, it's pretty obvious. What's costing you money? What's costing you time? What's causing you issues? You'll know if you really think critically about it, right? It's usually pretty obvious.
Yeah. The answer to the question is you need to immerse yourself in it enough to uncover the real problem.
And we've identified and given action steps as to how you can immerse.
Yeah.
And by taking those action steps, reading those books that I've loaded on you. If it's too much, just read summaries, because I know I load a lot.
Talent Code, the best one. One of my favorite books, by the way.
You
It's
haven't
such
read
a good book.
you haven't even read the ones I've mentioned. They're needle
I
moving.
have not all of them.
There's no way you haven't read it. You haven't read some of them. I know you haven't.
No, I haven't read all of them. No, but Talent Code is one of my
You
favorite
have read a
books.
lot of books. Got to give it to you.
So
Okay.
That was the last question.
That was all of them. That was
That
all.
was
of
all.
them. I had four, but the second one was answered by Josh's answer to my first question.
Love it.
So, guys, I hope that was powerful for you guys. We all have business problems, and immersion is a solid way, and really the most powerful way to overcome a problem. So take those action steps, take those resources, use them, and I can promise you that your biggest problems can be solved through using those tools, those resources. So thank you guys for taking the time to listen to us today. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to it as much as we enjoyed recording it. Until next time, guys, take care, stay busy, reach out to us, whatever questions you have. We're here to help you guys grow even more. Talk to you guys soon.
Let's do this too. I'm going to add one more thing on top of it. We mention books all the time. I tell you what, the other three on this podcast don't know what I'm going to say, and I'm going to throw all of us under the bus, but we're going to do it. By the time this podcast come out, we're going to have a page on our website, probably on both of our websites. And if you want the page, just email either Laura or Zach. I'll have them give their email address, and we'll start putting together a list of books and what podcasts we talk about with some links, just to make this a little bit easier for you guys. Because I think books are a great way to learn, because it's so easy to immerse yourself in a book, right? And other people's brilliant ideas.
What's really cool about that idea, Josh, is you're going to learn about concepts related to the industry, and you're kind of going to learn the main concept of the book. So you can kind of get away without reading the book. So that's a cool idea, Josh. I like it. You have put us under the bus, but I enjoy the idea, so you're forgiven.
It's a great idea.
Thank you guys so much. Chat to you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to Lip Service for Contractors. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to leave us a review in the App Store, and don't forget to share with your friends. Ideas are cheap. Implementation is what separates the winners from the watchers. Go out and implement these ideas. See you on the next episode of Lip Service for Contractors.